Stephen William Hawking, a name that became a symbol of intelligence, determination, and the limitless power of the human mind. He was the man who redefined what it means to be alive, proving that even when the body stops working, the mind can still touch the stars. Stephen Hawking was born on January 8, 1942, in Oxford, England. His birth was no ordinary coincidence. It happened exactly 300 years after the death of Galileo Galilei, one of the greatest scientists in history. Maybe destiny was already hinting that another great thinker had arrived. Stephen's parents were both highly educated. His father, Frank Hawking, was a medical researcher, and his mother, Isabel, was one of the first women to study at Oxford University. They valued education deeply and raised Stephen in an environment filled with books, curiosity, and scientific discussions. From a young age, Stephen showed a deep desire to understand how things worked. He loved building model airplanes, taking apart radios, and experimenting with mechanical toys. He wasn't considered a brilliant student at first. In fact, his handwriting was messy, and he was often slow to finish his work. But those who knew him well could see that behind his quiet personality was a brilliant and curious mind. At school, his friends nicknamed him Einstein. He was fascinated by mathematics and science, and he dreamed of one day understanding the mysteries of the universe. When he was just 17, Stephen won a scholarship to study at Oxford University. At first, he found life there a bit dull. He said the academic work was easy and that he only studied for about an hour a day. He preferred joining debates, rowing with the boat club, and joking around with friends. But even then, Stephen was drawn to the biggest questions imaginable. How did the universe begin? Why does it exist? What are the laws that govern everything?
He once said, "I wanted to know how the universe works, not just how to survive in it."
After graduating from Oxford, he moved to Cambridge University to pursue his PhD in cosmology, the study of the origin and structure of the universe. It was at Cambridge that Stephen's life took a sudden and tragic turn. At the age of 21, he began to notice something strange. He would trip while walking, his speech would slur, and he often felt weak.
You have a rare, incurable disease called ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
The disease would slowly destroy his muscles, leaving him unable to move, speak, or even breathe on his own. The doctors told him he had only 2 or 3 years to live. Imagine being 21, standing at the door of your dreams, and being told your time is almost up. For a while, Stephen was lost. He became depressed, feeling that life had no meaning anymore. But something unexpected happened. He fell in love. He met a young woman named Jane Wilde. Jane was kind, intelligent, and full of hope. Despite knowing his condition, she stood by him, believing in the strength of his mind. Their relationship gave Stephen a reason to fight back. He said later, "When I met Jane, I had something to live for." Stephen returned to his studies, determined to finish his PhD. Even as his body began to weaken, his mind grew sharper. He threw himself into his research on black holes and the origins of the universe. His curiosity became his strength, and his ideas began to change the world of science. He proposed that the universe had no boundaries in time or space, that it might have begun not from a single point, but as a smooth, curved surface, like a sphere. And then came his most famous discovery. Black holes are not entirely black. He proved that they emit energy, a phenomenon now known as Hawking radiation. This discovery changed our understanding of how the universe works and how it might eventually end. Stephen's fame grew around the world. His ideas were complex, but his explanations were simple and filled with wonder. He believed science should be for everyone, not just scientists. That's why he wrote his legendary book, A Brief History of Time. Published in 1988, the book became a global bestseller. It sold over 25 million copies and was translated into more than 40 languages. It brought the mysteries of the cosmos into ordinary homes and made Stephen Hawking one of the most recognized scientists on Earth. As the years passed, Stephen's disease continued to progress. He lost the ability to walk, then to move his arms, and eventually even his voice. But he refused to stop communicating. With the help of technology, engineers built a computer system that allowed him to speak through a single cheek muscle connected to a speech synthesizer. That robotic voice became his identity, the voice that echoed across lecture halls, documentaries, and interviews.
And through that voice, he shared words that inspired millions. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at.
Stephen Hawking continued to travel, teach, and research, despite being almost completely paralyzed. He appeared on television shows, met world leaders, and became a cultural icon.
He never lost his sense of humor. He once joked, "Women are the greatest mystery of the universe. Onden sa spine, ein natur understanden."
His personal life, however, was not without struggles. His marriage to Jane went through difficult times and eventually ended. Later, he married his nurse, Elaine Mason, though that relationship also ended in separation. Yet through all of it, Stephen remained focused on his work and his message of hope. He believed that life, no matter how hard, is full of possibilities. He once said, "My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus." Stephen Hawking passed away peacefully on March 14, 2018, on Albert Einstein's birthday. He was 76 years old, living more than 50 years longer than doctors had predicted. His ashes were buried in Westminster Abbey, between Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, the greatest minds in human history. Stephen Hawking left behind more than scientific theories. He left behind a message that no matter how impossible life seems, the human spirit can rise above any limitation. He showed us that strength doesn't come from muscles, but from the will to keep asking questions. He taught us to look up at the stars and wonder, rather than look down and give up.
He said, "Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Try to make sense of what you see and wonder about what makes the universe exist. Be curious."
Stephen Hawking's life was not a tragedy. It was a triumph, a journey from despair to discovery, from silence to a voice that reached the whole world. Even though he could not walk, his ideas traveled farther than any spaceship. Even though he could not speak, his words changed millions of lives. And even though he was told he would die young, he lived long enough to touch eternity. Stephen Hawking will forever be remembered as the man who made us understand the universe and ourselves. Rest in peace, Professor Stephen Hawking, the man who proved that the human mind truly has no limits.